So after 8 full seasons and 7 straight playoff appearances for the Utah Jazz, head coach Quin Snyder has officially decided to step down. And Quin Snyder saw the writing on the wall. He understood that he was not going to be able to take this Utah Jazz team over the hump. And even though he made them into a perennial playoff team every single year for the last 7 years consecutively, he understood it was time for him to move on and for the franchise to move in a different direction, and that's why he decided to step down. And I gotta first start off by saying, as a Utah Jazz fan, thank you so much for everything that you've done for the Salt Lake City and Utah Jazz organization, because, you know, even though I've never been to Utah and I've been a diehard Jazz fan my entire life, my dad's from Salt Lake City, so I grew up rooting for the Jazz. You know, I got a deep level and love and appreciation for what Quin Snyder has done in order to change the franchise around in these last 8 seasons, going from the days of Enes Kanter and Trey Burke and Dante Exum and Gordon Hayward to obviously Rudy Gobert and Boris Diaw and Gordon Hayward and Ricky Rubio, and then obviously Mike Conley and Bogdanovich and Jordan Clarkson and the entire team. Quin Snyder has made the Jazz a relevant team. He's made them into a perennial playoff team. 7 out of the last 8 seasons he's been there, but he understood that he was never going to be the coach to get them over the hump, and that is okay. I've met Quin Snyder back in 2017. I met the entire Utah Jazz team back in 2017. I'll put those 2 pictures right there for you guys to see with me, with Donovan Mitchell and Quin Snyder. I met Donovan Mitchell when he was still coming off the bench for a guy in Rodney Hood at the time, who was the 2 guard for the Utah Jazz. And this is before Donovan Mitchell ever popped off into the Rookie of the Year race, before he became this transcendent young superstar in the game. And Quin Snyder was just such a great guy. The entire team was so nice, and I was so grateful to have met that team, especially the run that we went on the 2018 playoffs where we knocked out the Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, you name it. That was a special year to be a Jazz fan too, and I really just have to say thank you so much, first and foremost, to Quin Snyder. That's just where I'm at. Even though Quin Snyder was able to make the Jazz, like I said, a playoff team 7 out of the last 8 years, the Jazz were never able to advance past the Western Conference semifinals. We've definitely had our opportunities, but the last 3 playoffs have not been a great outlook for the Jazz. When we go back 3 seasons in the playoffs to the bubble, the Jazz did blow a 3-1 lead despite not having Bojan Bogdanovich, who had wrist surgery. That was a huge hit to the Utah Jazz in the bubble. We fast forward to last season, where the Jazz finished with the #1 record in the regular season, finishing 52-20, and the Jazz did beat the Memphis Grizzlies 4-1 in the first round, advanced to the second round, and did lose to the LA Clippers in the conference semifinals after blowing another 3-1 lead. And this was a huge issue as well for the Utah Jazz, who had the inability to close out games, and especially when they had a 20-plus point lead in Game 6 of the semifinals of that series. And even the Jazz didn't have Mike Conley for the first 5 games of that series, I believe. That definitely hindered the Jazz's ability to finish out that series, considering the fact that Mike Conley is a huge part to the Utah Jazz's offense, especially when he was healthy, and he also takes and relieves some pressure off Donovan Mitchell. And then you look at this year, the Jazz lost in the first round to the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic, who they were finally able to get past the first round with Luka Doncic and a first-year head coach in the Dallas Mavericks uniform with Jason Kidd. And that was another part of the problem. The Utah Jazz were finally healthy come postseason time. They did not capitalize and take advantage after stealing home court advantage in Game 1 and winning that series. The Jazz were able to squeak out with the Game 4 win, but the Jazz ended up losing that series in 6. And Quin Snyder understood it was his time to go and the Jazz's time to go in a different direction. Now let's talk about the Jazz. Jazz had some decisions to make. Do they move on from Rudy Gobert? Do they move on from Donovan Mitchell? Or do they move on from Quin Snyder? I believe moving on from Quin Snyder was the proper thing to do, because you sometimes need a fresh face. Sometimes getting another guy in there, and maybe with the core group of guys, can help elevate this team and get them to the next level. We saw with Terry Stotts and the Portland Trailblazers, he was not able to get Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum over that hump and into championship aspirations. Even though they have Chauncey Billups now and they were a lottery team, Damian Lillard had their injuries. Maybe the Portland Trailblazers, that's what they need. Obviously, we saw with the core, with the Golden State Warriors, Mark Jackson built that team up with the trio of Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. but Steve Kerr was able to get them over the hump, and he became an all-time great coach. Say what you want about the team that he inherited, Steve Kerr is one of the greatest coaches in NBA history. Another great example of that was with Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics are in the finals as we speak, and they stole game 1, and game 2 is going on tonight. Ime Udoka, a first-year head coach, was able to get them over the hump, and look at them now. They've changed their mindset. They're a defensive-minded team. Brad Stevens wasn't able to get the job done, and look at the Boston Celtics now. People said Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum couldn't play together, but look at them now. People say Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell can't play together, but look at them now. They're still young. This Utah Jazz still has a great core and a great culture intact. It's up to the Jazz and the rest of the front office in order to build a proper team on and off the court for the Utah Jazz moving forward with Donovan Mitchell. Then lastly, I'll say with Quin Snyder is the fact that he had an inability to make changes, which is a huge reason as to why the Jazz, the last 3 seasons in the postseason, did not have success. Despite the injuries and some of the changes that had gone on throughout the season, the Jazz and Quin Snyder were reluctant to make changes. I believe that the Jazz had 15 double-digit blown leads just this past season, and that was obviously a recurring theme that we saw with the team. And it's not fun to talk about blowing leads, and the Jazz and Donovan Mitchell being frustrated about that, who definitely has some accountability to take, but this video is not about him. Quin Snyder was reluctant to make changes, and especially defensively. You could talk about the roster construction and how the fact that Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley, and the rest of the guys on the perimeter are not really known for their perimeter defense, which is why Rudy had such a difficult time guarding the perimeter, and that's why Rudy was quote-unquote unable to play in the fourth quarter of a tight game, because if a team went small ball, he would have to guard the perimeter. But obviously Rudy's one of the best defenders in the NBA, and he's elite at rim protection, one of the greatest to have ever done it. So it was fundamentally something wrong with the roster construction, defensively speaking, and Quin Snyder's adjustments, which were reluctant to make, in which he was reluctant to make some of those adjustments. It all kind of went hand in hand, and I think the Jazz are doing the right thing by stepping in a different direction, understanding that they have something special still with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, where that relationship still appears to be mendable, and I don't expect Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert, knock on wood, to request a trade anytime soon. And I do believe that getting a new coach and a new fresh face in here, while still building a proper roster around the two, can eventually lead to them getting over the hump. And I'm going to end this video off, like I said, just by saying thank you again so much for everything that you've done, Quin Snyder. Jazz fans, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. NBA fans, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Wishing you nothing but the best of luck moving forward. Probably going to be in San Antonio, Quin Snyder, but wherever you go, you deserve to be a head coach in the NBA, and I got nothing but the utmost love and respect for you, like all of us Jazz fans. Thank you so much. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second, and it helps me and the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Utah Jazz, NBA, and of course, Jacksonville Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. But Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Go Jazz, baby. Peace.